Ever think about, like, if life just threw you some crazy curveball, something that totally changes the game for you?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Today, we're diving into a story about a guy, Uncle, who faced a challenge I think most of us can't even imagine.
Right.
But his story, it's not really about tragedy.
No.
It's more about what, like, real resilience looks like.
And what's really interesting is we're going kind of beyond just the he bounced back thing. We're going to look to how he, like, redefined his whole life and found, in his words, a deeper kind of happiness after this crazy event.
Yeah, and the details are really incredible.
Yeah.
It all started back in 2008. Uncle was living in Texas, just doing some painting at a church, and bam, just a totally horrific electrical accident. We're talking like burns over most of his body, coma for 3 months.
Wow.
It's the kind of thing you think would just crush someone.
Yeah, but that's where the first layer of resilience comes in, right?
Yeah.
The physical impact was huge. I mean, loss of sight, unable to breathe through his nose.
It's a lot.
But his spirit wasn't broken. And I think a lot of that is thanks to his daughter, sister.
Okay, so sister is super important to this story.
Yeah, she is.
She was pretty young then, but they already had this crazy strong bond.
Yeah.
It's like she refused to see him as a victim, even with his appearance totally changed.
Yeah, exactly. Her perspective is just so powerful because it reframed everything, right?
Yeah.
Her love for him wasn't, like, conditional on how he looked.
Of course not.
Now, a lot of people in Uncle's situation, they might have just retreated inward, but he made a really daring choice.
Oh, yeah.
A full face transplant.
Whoa, full face transplant. That's not just like a little nip and tuck, right?
No. We're talking like 30 medical professionals, 17 hours of surgery, cutting edge stuff.
Wow.
And you have to remember, this was back in 2008, so facial transplantation was still pretty new. The risks were huge.
So what made him take such a big gamble?
It wasn't vanity, that's for sure.
I wouldn't think so, no.
What really comes through in his interviews is this desire to protect sister, you know, from how cruel the world can be.
Right.
He was afraid she'd be bullied or judged because of how he looked, and he just wanted to spare her that.
Wow. That's incredible. Really speaks volumes about how much he loved her.
Yeah.
But, I mean, let's be honest, some people might question that decision, right?
Oh, for sure.
Putting himself at risk like that.
And that's where this conversation about resilience gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Was it selfless? Was it a little reckless? It really makes you think about all the different sides of what being resilient really means.
So what happened after the transplant? What was it like for Uncle to, like, wake up in this new face, so to speak?
There's this really moving part in one of the interviews where he talks about taking his first breath through his nose in like 2.5 years.
Wow.
And then the joy of being able to smell food again, something so simple, so basic that most of us just take for granted.
Absolutely.
It was like a whole world opened up to him again.
Yeah, I bet. It's like he got a second chance to experience life through his senses.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing the biggest moment was seeing sister again.
Right.
Or, I guess, feeling her reaction because he couldn't see yet.
Exactly. Even though he was still blind, his whole focus was on how she saw him, you know?
Right.
Not how he felt in this new face, but how she would react to it.
Wow.
And that, to me, shows a deep truth about his resilience. It was all tied up with his love for her.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about protecting her, though. It was about him getting back his identity as a father, someone who could connect with his daughter in a way that felt more familiar, more natural.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It wasn't just about looks. It was about being able to, like, connect with his daughter on a deeper level, even though he couldn't physically see her.
Exactly. And that connection, that love, it became like this driving force in his recovery. Gave him a purpose, a reason to fight and to push through all the pain and uncertainty.
So what does Uncle's life look like these days? Like, did he ever get his sight back?
He didn't know.
Oh, man.
The damage to his optic nerves was just too much. It couldn't be reversed. But here's where his story gets even more interesting.
Yeah.
Despite everything, I mean, living in a world of darkness, Uncle says he's actually happier now than he was before the accident.
Wait, happier?
Yeah.
That just seems wild after all that.
Right. It really kind of throws a wrench in how we usually think about happiness, doesn't it?
For sure.
But when you listen to his interviews, you realize his happiness isn't about, like, ignoring the pain or pretending everything's perfect.
Yeah, I get that.
It's more about finding joy in the small things, the connections, the resilience he found in himself.
So what kind of things bring him joy now? How does he even navigate the world without being able to see?
Well, one thing is he got back into music, like really into it.
Oh, cool.
He talks about how music became a way to connect with everything again, to feel emotions, to escape.
Right.
He even learned to play piano again,
Wow.
which is pretty amazing considering he had to relearn it all by touch.
Yeah, talk about determination. It's like he found this whole new way to express himself, to be creative.
Totally. And he also finds a lot of peace in nature, spends a bunch of time outside walking, listening to birds, feeling the wind.
I love that.
He says it's how he feels grounded, connected to something bigger.
That's beautiful. It sounds like he's really tuned into his other senses, experiencing the world in a way most of us never do.
Exactly. And that's a big part of his resilience, right? That ability to adapt, to find new ways to feel joy and purpose when the old ways are gone.
So it's not about going back to who he was before. It's more about evolving, finding a new normal, a different kind of happiness.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Life is going to throw curveballs, things we can't control are going to happen. But Uncle's story shows us that even when things are really rough, we can adapt, grow, and find new meaning.
It's inspiring for sure. Makes you think about the role of the face transplant in all this. Like, did it even really matter for his happiness?
That's a great question. One that I think we need to dig into a bit more.
Yeah.
On the one hand, the transplant did what it was supposed to do. It protected Sister from bullying and let Uncle interact with her more naturally.
Right.
But on the other hand, it was a risky surgery, it had its own challenges, and it could have gone wrong in a lot of ways.
So how do we make sense of all that?
Yeah.
Was it ultimately worth it?
I think the answer is in understanding that the face transplant wasn't some magic fix.
Yeah.
It didn't erase what happened or make everything perfect, but it did give Uncle something to build on, to reconnect with his daughter, to move forward.
Like gave him a way to take control again,
Yeah.
to write his own story.
Exactly. And that feeling that he could shape his own future, that was huge in his journey to finding happiness.
Yeah, it really shows how physical and emotional healing are all tangled up. Right?
Absolutely.
It wasn't just about like fixing his face. It was about him feeling whole again.
Yeah, and that's what makes Uncle's story so powerful, right? It pushes us to think differently about what resilience means. It's not just bouncing back, it's adapting, growing, and finding new ways to thrive no matter what you're facing.
Like he took this horrible thing and made it fuel for transforming himself.
Exactly, and that's such an important message for everyone. It reminds us that even in the darkest times, we can find strength, find new things that bring us joy, and create a life that is really meaningful to us.
If you had to boil Uncle's story down to just one takeaway, what would it be?
I think it's that resilience isn't a finish line. It's the whole journey, you know?
Right.
It's all about constantly adapting, growing, discovering new things. And it's personal, it's different for everyone.
That's a really good point. It's not about comparing struggles or trying to measure up to someone else's idea of resilience.
Right.
It's about owning your own path and moving forward with guts and grace and knowing where you're headed.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And I think Uncle's story also shows how important it is to have people there for you. Love and support make a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure.
His daughter never gave up on him. She refused to see him as just his injuries, and that was huge for him, being able to heal and find happiness.
It really shows you don't have to go through tough stuff alone. Sometimes just having other people who care can be what gets you through it.
That's so true, and sometimes that support comes from where you least expect it. Like with Uncle, it was this amazing team of surgeons who did something pretty groundbreaking to give him another shot.
It's amazing to think how far one person's resilience can reach. Uncle's story has touched so many people, his daughter and family, the doctors, and anyone who hears what he went through.
And that's the beauty of these deep dives, right? We get to hear these stories about the strength of the human spirit, learn from them, and be inspired to live our own lives a little braver, a little kinder, a little more determined.
So as we wrap up, is there a question you want to leave everyone with? Something to think about as they go about their day?
Maybe just, what does resilience mean in my life? What makes me strong? And how can I build up even more of that strength for when things get tough?
That's a really good one. Something to think about for sure. I mean, in the end, Uncle's story reminds us that resilience isn't some magical power only a few people have. It's in all of us. And we can make it stronger by the choices we make, the people we surround ourselves with, and by believing in ourselves.
Well said. And thanks for coming along on this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time for another look into what it means to be human.